I was standing in front of a cracked mirror in a cheap, neon-lit motel room on the outskirts of Nashville, looking at a face that wasn't mine, and realizing that if I didn't pull off the greatest lie of my life in the next 3 hours, my father would spend the rest of his life behind bars for a crime he didn't commit, and our family home would be seized by the very people who framed him. I had the platinum blonde wig perfectly styled, the signature matte red lipstick that felt like war paint, and a voice I had practiced in the shower until my throat literally bled. But as I stepped out into the humid, heavy Tennessee night, I knew that one wrong move meant I wasn't just faking a celebrity. I was signing my own death warrant. The air felt thick with the smell of rain and expensive exhaust, and as the black SUV pulled up to the curb, I felt my soul leaving my body. Was I wrong for manipulating thousands of people, deceiving the elite of the music industry, and risking a massive federal lawsuit just to save my family? Or would you have become a ghost to save the people you love too? Tell me honestly, because by the end of this story, you might realize you're capable of things you never imagined. The nightmare didn't start with glitter, sold-out stadiums, or high-waisted shorts. It started with a violent knock on the door 6 months ago that shattered our world. My father, David, was a simple man, a veteran stagehand who had worked the local circuits for 3 decades. A man who knew every knot in a rope and every light in a rig. But he had been set up as the fall guy for a massive embezzlement scheme involving a high-profile Music for Hearts charity concert. The real culprit was his boss, a man named Marcus Miller, a high-society predator who had enough money to buy the truth and bury the evidence under layers of legal jargon. My dad was arrested in front of the neighbors, handcuffed while still wearing his work boots. We were broke, facing immediate eviction, and the high-priced defense lawyers told me we needed $200,000 just to start a proper defense and hire private investigators to clear his name. I watched my mother wither away from stress, her hair turning gray in weeks, and I knew I couldn't just sit there and watch us drown. That's when I realized that while I didn't have money, I had one thing that people in this town would kill for. I looked exactly like the biggest pop star on the planet. I never asked to be a doppelganger. In high school, it was just a funny coincidence, a joke that earned me a few extra followers on Instagram. But as she got more famous, as her face became the most recognized image on earth, it became a burden. People would stop me in grocery stores. Teenagers would burst into tears in the mall thinking I was her. And I always politely laughed it off, explaining I was just a girl from East Nashville. But looking at the final eviction notice taped to our front door, the laughter died a permanent death. I realized my curse was actually a weapon. I spent 3 months in total isolation, turning our basement into a training camp. I studied every single interview she ever gave, every hand gesture, every specific way she tilted her head when she was thinking, and every vocal inflection that made her voice iconic. I didn't just want to look like her. I had to inhabit her soul. I learned her handwriting, her favorite drinks, and even the way she looked when she was trying to hide being annoyed. I knew Miller was hosting an exclusive, underground auction at his private estate where he was selling off memorabilia that he had actually stolen from the charity funds. If I could get into that auction as the guest of honor, the secret guest he'd been bragging about to his investors, I could get close enough to his private office to find the hard drive my dad told me about. The one that contained the real ledger proving Miller was the one moving the money into offshore accounts. To make this work, the transformation had to be flawless. I sold my car, my laptop, and even my grandmother's wedding ring just to afford the high-end makeup, the designer replica boots that were indistinguishable from the real thing, and a custom-made dress that looked like it cost $50,000, but was actually a masterpiece of thrift store fabric and thousands of hand-sewn crystals. My best friend, Leo, who had worked security for years, agreed to be my handler. He was the only person who knew the truth. We spent weeks practicing the superstar entrance. The way you step out of a car without looking at the ground. The way you acknowledge a crowd without actually stopping. We knew that the moment we stepped onto Miller's property, we were in the lion's den. Miller was a man who didn't just break lives, he erased them. If he caught on, he wouldn't just call the police for fraud. He'd likely have us buried in the woods behind his mansion to protect his multi-million-dollar empire. The night of the event, the Tennessee sky was bruised purple, and my heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought I'd have a heart attack before we even reached the gates. We pulled up in a blacked-out SUV we had rented with the very last of my mother's savings. When the gates of the Miller estate opened, I felt like I was crossing the river Styx. When I stepped out of that car, the air was filled with the sound of shutters. Not from paparazzi because this was a private event, but from the iPhones of wealthy, corrupt donors who were absolutely mesmerized. I walked with that specific, confident stride, head held high, radiating a quiet power I absolutely did not feel. My palms were sweating, but I kept my hands steady. Miller approached me, his eyes wide with a mixture of greed and shock. He really believed his own lies. He thought he was the ultimate power player for landing a private appearance from a superstar who usually avoids events like this. I had to keep my voice low, using her specific breathy melodic tone, complaining about the insufferable drive and the need for a private room to freshen up away from the cameras. He bought it hook, line, and sinker. He led me through the mansion, pointing at his art collection and boasting about his success, while I was secretly counting security cameras and memorizing the layout of every hallway. The grand ballroom was a sickening display of wealth. A sea of silk, diamonds, and the smell of expensive perfume, all built on the backs of people like my father. I had to navigate through a crowd of the most powerful people in the state, making small talk with donors who could buy my life 10 times over. One woman, a prominent socialite, tried to trap me in a conversation about a specific recording session in London that had happened 2 years ago. My heart stopped. I hadn't researched that specific week. I felt the sweat start to prickle under my wig. I quickly pivoted, leaning in close and whispering. Honestly, that week was such a blur. I try not to even think about the London sessions. They were so emotionally draining. And I gave her a small, sad smile. She was so thrilled to have a vulnerable moment with a star that she let it go immediately, bragging to her friends that she and Taylor had shared a deep moment. But the clock was ticking. The auction was about to start, and Miller was keeping a close eye on me. I needed him away from his office. I spent 2 hours acting the part of the most famous woman on earth, taking photos with people I despised, and signing autographs with a signature I had practiced 10,000 times until it was muscle memory. Every time someone asked a specific question about a tour date or a hidden meaning in a song lyric, my stomach did a somersault, but I played the exhaustive artist card perfectly, acting like I was just there for the charity. Finally, I saw my opening. Miller got distracted by a high bidder who was causing a scene over a vintage guitar. I signaled to Leo. He moved toward the catering area and accidentally tripped, sending a massive tower of champagne glasses crashing to the marble floor. The sound was deafening. While every head in the ballroom turned toward the noise and the security rushed to help, I slipped behind a heavy velvet curtain and disappeared into the west wing. My heart was racing so fast I could hear it in my ears as I sprinted down the hallway, my heels clicking on the floor. I found his study. The door was heavy oak and locked tight, but I had spent hours watching locksmith videos. I used a thin metal shim, and with a satisfying click, I was inside. The room smelled of expensive cigars, old leather, and the stench of corruption. I found the safe hidden behind a massive portrait of Miller himself. The ego on this man was my greatest ally. The code, I guessed, would be something personal. I tried his anniversary, his birthday, nothing. Then I remembered his daughter's birthday from a social media post I'd seen months ago. I punched in the numbers, and the safe clicked open. Inside were stacks of cash, offshore account ledgers, and a small silver hard drive, the black box my father had overheard Miller talking about. My fingers were shaking so violently I almost dropped it. I plugged the drive into the laptop hidden in my oversized bag. The progress bar for the download was agonizingly slow. 5%, 12%, 25%. Every second felt like a year of my life disappearing. I could hear the muffled sounds of the auction starting in the distance. If I wasn't back on that stage in 10 minutes, Miller would come looking for me. I was at 85% when I heard the heavy thud of footsteps in the hallway. I froze. The door handle turned. I barely had time to yank the laptop and the drive into the dark corner behind a floor-to-ceiling velvet curtain. Miller walked in, his voice loud and aggressive as he talked on his cell phone. He was laughing, telling someone on the other end about how he was going to dispose of the final evidence and pin the entire charity collapse on that idiot stagehand once the auction ended. He was standing 3 feet away from me. I could see the polish on his expensive shoes through a tiny gap in the curtain. If he moved the fabric even an inch, I was dead. I held my breath until my lungs burned and my vision started to blur. I watched him pour a glass of scotch, his back to me. He sounded so smug, so certain that he was untouchable. Suddenly my laptop, which was still finishing the download, made a tiny, high-pitched ping to signal completion. In that silent mahogany room, it sounded like a bomb going off. Miller froze. He slowly turned his head toward the curtain where I was hiding. So there I was, dressed as a global icon, shivering in the shadows of a predator's office, holding the only evidence that could save my father from a lifetime in a cage, while the man who ruined my life moved closer and closer to my hiding spot. I had to make a choice that would define the rest of my life. Do I stay hidden and hope he doesn't see me, or do I walk out and try to bluff my way through the most dangerous conversation of my life? Before I tell you the insane way I escaped that room and the final, public revenge I pulled on that stage in front of his entire world, I want you to pause. Think about the stakes. My dad's life was on the line. My mother's sanity was on the line. Comment below right now. What would you have done? Would you have stayed hidden and risked being caught like a rat? Or would you have walked right into the lion's den to bluff your way out? I'm reading every comment, so tell me your move. I didn't stay hidden. I knew that if he found me cowering, I was done. So I took a deep breath, channeled every bit of superstar energy I had, and I stepped out from behind the curtain before he could reach it. But I didn't look scared. I looked absolutely furious. I put on the most entitled cold Diva voice I could muster and demanded to know why there was no privacy in this disgusting shack of a house. I shouted at him, asking why he was following me when I clearly asked for a moment to take a private call from my management. I told him that I was already second-guessing this appearance, and that if he didn't get out of my face and give me 5 minutes of peace, I would walk out of the auction right now, take my security with me, and tell every news outlet in Nashville that he was a fraudulent hack who didn't know how to treat guests. The shift in his face was pathetic. He went from a predator to a groveling servant in 3 seconds. He was so terrified of losing the clout, of having a star at his event, that he actually started stuttering apologies. He backed out of the room, bowing, and closed the door. I grabbed the drive, tucked it into my corset, and walked back to the ballroom with my head held high. But I wasn't just there to escape, I was there to finish him. When the auction reached its peak, Miller invited me onto the stage to say a few words before the final item was sold. A guitar he claimed was a personal gift from me to the charity. I stepped up to the microphone, the spotlights blinding me. I looked at the crowd of people who thought they were better than the world. I didn't sing. Instead, I leaned into the mic and said, "You know, I've been thinking a lot about stories lately. About how easy it is to tell a lie if you have enough money to back it up." I saw Miller's smile falter at the side of the stage. I continued, "I'm working on a new project. It's about a man named Marcus who thought he could frame an innocent father to hide his own theft. It's a story about $20 million, 3 offshore accounts in the Caymans, and a silver hard drive that's currently being uploaded to the FBI." The silence in that room was so heavy you could hear a pin drop. Miller rushed the stage, his face purple with rage, but I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye and whispered into the mic so the whole room could hear. "The thing about reputations, Marcus, is that they're made of glass. And I just threw a rock." Leo was already moving. He grabbed my arm as the crowd erupted into chaos. We ran for the exit as Miller screamed for his security to stop us. But my security was faster. We jumped into the SUV and tore out of the driveway, the tires screaming on the pavement. We were halfway down the main road when I saw the blue and red lights reflecting in the rearview mirror. Not for us. They were heading toward the mansion. Leo had already sent the files to the district attorney and the lead investigator on my father's case the moment I started speaking on stage. By the time Miller realized I was a fake, the Real police were already at his door to arrest the real criminal. The hard drive was a gold mine. It didn't just clear my father. It exposed a decades-long web of corruption that took down half the city's elite. The aftermath was a total media circus. The news spent weeks debating whether the real star had pulled a daring undercover stunt or if it was an imposter. Her legal team eventually issued a statement saying she was not in the state, but by then the public didn't care. They were too busy watching Marcus Miller being hauled off to prison in handcuffs. My father was released 3 days later. I'll never forget the moment the prison gates opened and he walked out, still looking for the daughter who had vanished for months. When he saw me, he didn't see a pop star or a celebrity. He saw his little girl. He held me so tight I couldn't breathe, and he whispered, "I don't know how you did it, but I know it was you." We lost the house eventually because of the legal fees, but we didn't care. We had each other, and we had the truth. I moved my family to a small town in the Northwest where nobody looks for celebrities and the only fans I have are the birds in the backyard. I never told the police the truth about that night, and I burned the wig and the dress in a bonfire behind our new home. I realized that sometimes, the world is a stage, and if the script is written by villains, you have to be the one to rewrite the ending. I'm not a hero, and I'm definitely not a star. I'm just a daughter who refused to let her father be a victim. I've learned that the clothes you wear and the face you show the world don't define who you are. It's the lengths you're willing to go for the people you love that truly matter. Like this video if you think I did the right thing by using a fake identity to take down a monster. And subscribe for more stories of people who took the law into their own hands when the system failed them. This journey taught me that everyone has a mask, but it's what's underneath that counts. Share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments. Did I go too far? Or was it a perfect ending for a man who deserved to lose everything? Do you think the real star would be proud of what I did, or would she sue me? Let's talk about it below. I'll see you all in the next story.